Welcome back to Building SY Mistress, everybody. In this episode, I get that rubber fixed to the anchor locker. I know there were quite a few people interested to see how I was going to do that, so wait till you see that. I think it's a very good solution. I also get those V-berth cabinet doors finished, and they've come up looking really good, as well as fitting the start switch panel, and that really does add another little Rosewood touch to the engine bay there. If you do enjoy this content, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and as I always say, leave a comment because I do enjoy reading what you have to say. Thanks for watching. Well, good morning everybody. Welcome back to Mistress's boatyard here. Another day of getting a lot done. Now that that hard dodger is in hand, I'm moving through the post-it note list. I am ticking them off, which is great, but there's obviously heaps to do. And so I want to just try and get as many of those done as possible before I make a start on sanding the hull and the decks. So with that, this here is insertion rubber. It's 4.5 millimeters thick. I bought a section of a 1200 mil roll, and this is for the anchor locker. So along with some other things that I want to get done today, I want to get this cut up and fitted. So what I'll be doing with this is I've obviously already measured the pieces for where that needs to go. And so once those pieces are cut up, they'll be bonded in place with the good Fix-Tech product Fix 15. And to let you know as well, what I decided on was to leave gaps where the corners are, rather than try and have the whole thing covering the whole space. Bear with me so that I can explain. I can envisage salt water and fresh water in the form of condensation getting down between those gaps in the corners where the rubber rolls around, and I just don't want water sitting there over time for the obvious corrosion reasons. So I think by having the corners not big enough that a chain link can actually reach those corners and damage them, but they can drain water so that I don't end up with, as I say, water collecting there. And just one other thing to mention, this stuff really has a strong chemical odour. If you've been into a rubber store, you'll know what I mean. For that reason, this has actually been sitting draped over two of these stands for a week in the shade, getting rained on and just airing. I haven't had it in the sun, and now this smell is much reduced. Just a little tip for those who might want to do this sort of thing. So how I'm putting these rubber pieces in place is I'm just sanding them with 120 grit paper just to roughen up the back where it'll be adhered, wiping it down just with a damp cloth, and then using the trusty Fix 15 getting that all over the back of the panels and putting them in place. I've already done that small bottom piece, somewhat of a test piece. That was kind of the easy one because I made up a plywood template of that shape and then put weights on top of it. Getting these side ones in place is going to be a bit tricky because there is a bit of weight in these. So I'll have to put some chocks underneath the bottom, I think, to stop that from falling down, and come up with some ways of putting some timbers, athwartships, to hold them in place. One thing I do want to say with regards to this whole anchor locker situation, it's a real kind of conundrum because they inevitably end up being a place that gets pretty dirty and holds a bit of salty water. And so, yeah, what ends up transpiring over time will remain. I think the rubber's going to do a great job of protecting the steel, and hopefully it stays in place. But the drainage of it, I haven't completely solved yet. There is a drain hole right at the forward end at the lowest point. What I'm going to do with that, I'm not exactly sure. In the meantime, these need to be fitted in place, and I can think about the other things ahead. Well, it's time to tick off another thing on the list of things to do, and that's this ignition switch control panel. And I had to make up this spacer in order to protect all the wiring as it goes through this box here when it's hinged up, so that it doesn't get damaged on those struts behind there. So I've taped everything up, sanded everything. Now it's a case of mixing up some epoxy. I'm just going to try and support this with some bits of timber and a little bit of pressure and see if that can hold it in place, fingers crossed. And once this is fitted, of course, then I can just get this panel itself and screw it on top of that spacer, which I've already drilled the holes for that. So I'll mix up some epoxy and bond this in place. Until the next episode, everybody.